Good evening, and welcome back to Midnight Radio True Crime. I'm so glad you've joined us tonight. Wherever you are, tucked under a blanket, maybe listening to the soft hum of a fan or the rain tapping your window, perhaps lying on your side with just a sliver of light. Thank you for choosing to spend this night with us. Take a moment to settle in. Let the day's stress slip away, and allow yourself to sink into the quiet hours. This story will guide you gently, even as it leaves a trace of unease that lingers in the back of your mind. And as always, we love hearing from our listeners. Leave a comment and tell us which city you're tuning in from tonight. It's a small way of reminding ourselves that no matter how eerie the night feels, we're never entirely alone. Tonight, our tale is quiet, almost ordinary at first glance, but the ordinary can be deceptive. One last delivery, one address that doesn't quite feel right, one night that never leaves the memory of the person who experienced it. And now, listen closely as tonight's storyteller takes us through every moment of that night, a night that still haunts them today.
My name is Ryan, and I drive deliveries for one of those food apps that never sleep. Most nights are routine. Pick up, drop off, maybe a small tip, maybe a sleepy thank you from a late night customer. But the night of delivery number 42, it wasn't routine at all. It's the kind of night that stays with you, the kind you replay in your mind over and over, wondering how something so ordinary could turn so wrong so quickly. I had been on the road since noon, chasing bonuses that never seemed worth the hours. By 10:47 p.m., I was ready to call it a night when my phone buzzed. Order number 42. I glanced at the screen and muttered a half laugh, half sigh. 42, lucky number, huh? The pickup was at Bangkok Express, my usual spot on Maple Street. Easy enough. But the drop-off address gave me pause. 218 Willow Lane. I had never heard of Willow Lane, and the map led me through streets I didn't recognize. Streets that felt forgotten even by the city itself. The restaurant was dimly lit, steam rising from the kitchen like wisps of fog. The cook handed me a single brown paper bag, light, almost suspiciously so. No drink, I asked, raising an eyebrow. He shook his head slowly, eyes tired. They always order the same thing, he said quietly. You deliver fast, yes? Before I could reply, he had turned back to wiping the counter, as if speaking further would be pointless. I shrugged and stepped outside, the chill of late October hitting me immediately. Wet asphalt, the tang of fallen leaves, and the faint hum of distant traffic wrapped around me. I climbed into my car, letting the warmth of the heater push back the cold, and followed the GPS directions. The route led me past shuttered warehouses and empty lots, through streets where even the streetlights seemed to have given up flickering. At one point, a gas station appeared, long since closed, windows dusty, a sign swinging with a hollow creak. Willow Lane itself was dimly lit, the streetlights flickering inconsistently, casting long, uneven shadows across the cracked pavement. Houses sat in various stages of decay. Overgrown yards, sagging porches, peeling paint. Mail spilled from rusted boxes, crumpled and yellowed from neglect. And then I saw it, 218 Willow Lane. The porch sagged slightly, blue paint flaking like old skin. Only one upstairs window emitted a faint yellow glow, pale and artificial. I felt a shiver run down my spine, the kind you can't shake even with a blast of the heater. The app's instructions were simple. Leave at the door. Don't knock. I parked carefully, grabbed the bag, and stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked under my weight. The night was impossibly quiet. Not a single car passed, not a dog barked, not even the wind seemed to move. And then I heard it. A soft dragging sound from inside the house, deliberate and slow, like someone moving furniture. I froze. My pulse spiked. I whispered, almost to myself, "Hello!" Silence. I snapped a photo of the doorstep for proof of delivery and started back toward my car. My shoes crunched against gravel, loud in the oppressive quiet. Then, the faintest creak, the door at 218 Willow Lane began to open. A sliver of light spilled onto the porch, catching dust in the air, giving it an almost unreal golden glow. I called out, louder this time, "Your food's here." Nothing. The shadow in the doorway didn't move. Could it have been a man, or someone, or something else entirely? And then the light inside went out. Complete darkness swallowed the house. I slid into the car, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But as I glanced into the rearview mirror, I could see the door still open, and in that narrow line of darkness, I thought I saw movement. A subtle shift, the glint of an eye catching the faint light of my taillights. I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of the night. Even now, months later, driving past empty streets or forgotten houses, I feel that same chill crawl up my spine. That night, delivery number 42 changed everything about the way I see quiet streets, abandoned houses, and orders that seem normal at first glance. I didn't sleep well that night, not really. Even after pulling away from 218 Willow Lane and trying to convince myself it was nothing, the image of that single glowing window lingered in my mind. I kept replaying the moment I thought I saw movement in the doorway, the way the air felt thicker on that porch, the faint dragging sound from inside the house. The next morning, I woke to an ache in my shoulders and a tightness in my chest. I didn't know if it was fear, tension, or just the weight of a long day of driving, but it clung to me. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, scrolling through the delivery history. That was when I realized something strange. Order number 42 was gone. Not just the tip or the delivery note, the whole order had vanished from my history. No address, no confirmation, no record that it had ever existed. At first, I thought maybe the app glitched. I'd seen it happen before, but something told me it wasn't a glitch. Something told me the house at 218 Willow Lane wasn't an ordinary delivery stop. I tried to go about my day normally. I ran errands, stopped for gas, even grabbed lunch from the same restaurant I'd picked up the order from. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that single window glowing in the dark. Every time my phone buzzed with another order, I felt a moment of panic, imagining a repeat of the night before. By evening, I found myself driving past Willow Lane again, almost without thinking. The streets were still quiet, shadows stretching long under the flickering streetlights. And then I saw it, the house. The same sagging porch, the same peeling paint, the single upstairs window lit like a faint beacon in the darkness. I parked a block away, heart hammering, and just watched. For minutes that felt like hours, nothing happened. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was inside, waiting, watching. I couldn't see a figure, couldn't hear footsteps, but the tension in the air was palpable. Finally, curiosity and some irrational sense of obligation drove me closer. Maybe it was the delivery driver in me, needing closure, needing to understand why the order had disappeared. I stepped onto the porch again. The boards groaned under my weight, louder than I expected. The door was closed this time. No sound, no glow. I pressed the doorbell out of habit. Nothing. My hand hovered over the doorknob. It was cold, surprisingly so, even for the night. Then, from somewhere deep inside the house, I heard it. A faint whisper, almost inaudible. I thought I imagined it at first, but then it came again. A sound like someone moving softly, careful not to alert me to their presence. I stepped back instinctively. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to run, to drive away and never look back. But part of me wanted to see. Part of me needed to know. I reached for my phone, ready to call someone, anyone, when I noticed the front window on the first floor. Curtains had shifted slightly. A shadow passed behind them, subtle and quick, but enough to freeze me in place. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. And then I heard it clearly, a sound that will never leave me. Footsteps on the wooden floor, moving slowly, deliberately, coming closer to the door. I stepped back, nearly tripping over the edge of the porch. My hands shook as I gripped the phone tighter. I wanted to leave, and yet I couldn't pull my eyes away from the house. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, the door creaked open just a fraction, and I caught a glimpse of movement in the threshold. A shape that didn't belong. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, unsure whether to run or to move forward. But in that moment, I realized something undeniable. Whatever was inside, it had been waiting for someone like me. And just like that, the night shifted. The calm, ordinary world of streetlights and empty houses had disappeared. Every instinct screamed that I was no longer just a delivery driver. I was a witness, and then a sound from inside the house that made my blood run cold. Something dragging again, louder this time, deliberate, heavy. Not a chair or table, but something that shouldn't have been moved. I stumbled back to my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands slick with sweat. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the dark. But even as I pulled away, I could feel it. Eyes on me, watching, waiting. That night I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. And when I told myself I had imagined it all, the sound of dragging furniture replayed in my mind over and over, mocking me. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning. The house had a story, one I wasn't supposed to uncover. And by the time I realized the truth, it would be too late to turn back. I couldn't stop thinking about the house, even after that night. Sleep came only in short, restless bursts, haunted by the image of the glowing upstairs window and the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but deep down I knew it wasn't. By the next evening, I found myself driving past Willow Lane again. The streets were quiet, unnervingly so, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes every distant sound feel amplified. The house sat there like it always had, peeling blue paint, sagging porch, the single yellow window faintly glowing. I parked a little farther down the street this time, the engine still running, and watched. My stomach churned with a mix of fear and morbid curiosity. Something inside me wouldn't let it go. Something told me I had to know what had happened the night before. After what felt like an eternity, I finally stepped out of the car and made my way to the porch. My shoes crunched against the dry leaves scattered across the steps. I hesitated, hand hovering over the doorknob. The faint glow of the window upstairs made the shadows inside the house seem to stretch and move in impossible ways. I took a deep breath and turned the knob. The door swung open slowly, almost reluctantly, revealing a hallway coated in dust and darkness. The smell hit me immediately, a mixture of mildew, old wood, and something else I couldn't quite identify, something faintly metallic and sharp. My pulse jumped. I stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under my weight. My flashlight, small but reliable, illuminated a narrow corridor lined with old wallpaper, peeling at the edges, revealing water-stained plaster beneath. Every creak echoed through the empty house, making it feel larger, emptier, and somehow alive. I moved cautiously, each step deliberate. My mind ran through all the possibilities. Rats, a vagrant hiding inside, a loose floorboard, anything to explain what I had heard the night before. But nothing in my experience could account for the sound of dragging furniture, the fleeting shadow in the doorway, or the sense that someone or something had been watching me from inside. The living room was empty, but signs of occupation were unmistakable. A chair was overturned, a layer of dust disrupted in a perfect path from the front door to the back of the room. Papers scattered across the floor, some torn, some crumpled, as if someone had been rifling through them in a hurry. I knelt to examine them. Most were old letters and bills, yellowed with age, but one envelope caught my attention. It wasn't addressed to anyone I recognized. It had only the number 42 scrawled in a messy hand across the front. My stomach tightened. I heard the dragging sound again, faint at first, coming from the staircase that led upstairs. My flashlight trembled in my hand. I debated turning around and leaving, but some part of me, curiosity, foolish bravery, or an inexplicable need to confront whatever was inside, pushed me forward. Step by step, I climbed the staircase. The sound grew louder, heavier. I realized with a jolt that it wasn't just dragging furniture, it was dragging something alive, something struggling. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched before me, the single lit window at the end of the hall flickering like a heartbeat. I inched toward it, trying to keep my breathing quiet. Each step felt like a lifetime. I passed closed doors, each one threatening to swing open, to reveal whatever was making the sound. And then I saw it. The door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar, shadows spilling out into the hallway. The dragging stopped abruptly, replaced by silence. My heart pounded so loudly I feared it would give me away. I forced myself to take another step, and then another, until I reached the door. Peeking inside, I froze. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It wasn't a person, not exactly, at least not fully conscious or aware. But there was someone. A human shape, restrained, barely moving, in the dim light of a single lamp. The sight made bile rise in my throat. And then, from somewhere deeper inside the house, I heard another sound. A faint, deliberate whisper. Not a whisper of words I could understand. Just a hiss, a promise, a warning. I stepped back, but in that instant, a floorboard behind me creaked. The whisper stopped. Silence. Then movement. Something shifted in the room, just enough to catch my eye, before vanishing into darkness again. I stumbled back, my flashlight swinging wildly, illuminating the walls in staccato bursts. Couldn't leave, and yet I couldn't stay. Something about the house demanded my attention, and something else told me it wanted to be left alone. I realized then that whatever had happened the night of delivery number 42 wasn't random. It had been waiting for me, watching, testing, and now I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The hallway seemed endless, stretching like a tunnel into a place I wasn't sure I wanted to go. My flashlight trembled in my hand, every creak of the floor beneath me echoing like a warning. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was just out of sight, watching, waiting. I moved toward the door at the end of the hall again. The dim glow of the single lamp inside flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls in impossible shapes. My stomach twisted as I realized that the person I had glimpsed wasn't just restrained. They were small, curled up, terrified, and utterly helpless. I stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. The air smelled of mildew and decay, mixed with a sharper, metallic tang that made my stomach churn. The whispering sound returned, softer this time, almost like a sigh, slipping through the cracks in the walls. Then I saw it, a narrow doorway hidden behind an old, hanging tapestry. The fabric was thick and dusty, untouched for years. I hesitated. Something about the door screamed danger, but my instincts as a delivery driver, or maybe my morbid curiosity, forced me closer. The door was small, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. I pushed it gently. It creaked in protest, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading downward. The air that escaped smelled damp, like the inside of a cellar that hadn't been opened in decades. My heart pounded so hard I feared it would burst through my chest. I debated turning back, but the faint noise of movement from below drew me forward. Step by step, I descended, the wooden stairs groaning under my weight. The flashlight barely penetrated the darkness, illuminating cobwebs and dust particles floating like tiny stars in a black void. At the bottom, I found myself in a small, windowless room. The walls were bare, except for deep scratches that etched across the wood like some kind of warning. And in the middle of the room, lying on a threadbare mattress, was the person I had seen upstairs, a young woman, her eyes wide with fear, hands bound tightly. Her breathing was shallow, and she flinched when I stepped closer. "Hey, it's okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if it was. "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't respond, only stared at me, frozen, as if any movement might trigger some unspeakable consequence. I wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, but the atmosphere of the room kept me rooted in place. The dragging sound I had heard upstairs returned, louder this time, echoing through the house with a rhythm that matched the beat of my racing heart. I scanned the room for anything that could explain this nightmare. A stack of papers lay in a corner, stained and torn, with words I couldn't make sense of. A small box on a shelf rattled slightly, as if something inside were alive. My hands shook, my mind racing with fear and confusion. Then I heard the whisper again, closer this time. Not from the woman, but from somewhere else behind a wall, under the floor, or maybe above the ceiling. The sound was deliberate, taunting, like someone testing my courage. I realized then that the house wasn't just abandoned or boarded up. It was alive in a way I couldn't explain, filled with secrets that were meant to remain hidden. And by stepping inside, I had invited myself into something I might never escape from. The woman looked at me again, desperation in her eyes, and I understood. Whatever had been keeping her here had not finished with her, and it might not be done with me either. I took a step back, my flashlight flickering as the shadows seemed to stretch toward me, closing the space between us and the rest of the house. The walls groaned, almost in response to my presence. And in that moment, I knew this night would change everything. Not just for her, but for me. Something was coming. I could feel it. A presence that had been patient, waiting, and now aware that I had entered its domain. The sound of dragging grew louder, closer, resonating through the very floor beneath my feet. I had no idea what I was about to face, but I knew one thing with certainty. There was no turning back now. I barely registered the stairs behind me anymore, my focus consumed by the woman on the mattress and the strange, deliberate sounds that reverberated through the house. The dragging upstairs, the soft, rhythmic scraping of something heavy against wood, had grown louder, more confident, like it knew I was down here, watching, waiting. The woman's eyes flicked to the stairs behind me. I hadn't noticed before, but her glance carried the weight of warning. A subtle shift in posture that told me she had been listening to that sound far longer than I had. She hadn't said a word, but the tension in her body spoke volumes. I don't know how long you've been down here, I whispered, crouching closer to her. Are you hurt? Her lips parted slightly, a small gasp, but no sound came. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable, deepened by the shadows playing across the walls from my flashlight. I realized then how alone she must have felt in this room. Trapped, unheard, invisible. The dragging noise intensified upstairs, accompanied now by something else. The faint creak of a floorboard shifting, followed by the metallic rattle of a chain. My stomach turned. Whoever or whatever had been moving around this house wasn't doing it by accident. I glanced at the small staircase I had descended to reach the hidden room. Going back up meant crossing the hallway, passing that ominous source of noise. But leaving her here alone wasn't an option. Can you stand? I asked, keeping my voice low. My hands shook as I reached for her. She nodded slightly, her movements stiff, practiced, trained to be quiet, careful. My mind raced with questions, but I forced myself to focus. Step by step, I guided her toward the stairs. Each movement was deliberate, slow, trying to make as little sound as possible. The dragging and rattling above seemed to sense us, as if it were aware of our intent. The rhythm changed, heavier, faster, almost impatient. I reached the bottom of the hidden staircase. My flashlight caught the edges of the hallway above. Dark, silent, oppressive. The faint light from the window at the end of the hall seemed dimmer now, almost swallowed by shadows. I placed my hand on the wall and whispered, "We're going upstairs. Slowly. We'll be okay." She didn't reply, only clung to my arm as we began our ascent. Every creak of the stairs echoed loudly. Every scraping sound above us amplified in the tension that filled the house. My heart was pounding so hard I feared it might betray our movements. As we reached the top landing, I realized something. The hallway seemed longer than I remembered. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, deepening around closed doors that might hide anything. My flashlight flickered for the first time, the beam weakening, forcing me to hold it closer, to narrow my field of vision. The dragging sound paused. Silence. Then a low, deliberate knock. Not on the door, but on the wall beside us. My stomach sank. Whoever or whatever had been moving around was aware of our presence now. We stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear. Another scrape, this time closer, accompanied by the metallic rattle again. It wasn't random. It was measuring us, testing us, waiting for the wrong move. I looked down the hallway. The door at the far end, the one that had been slightly ajar before, was now fully closed. The glow from inside had vanished completely. My mind screamed at me to turn back, to leave, but the woman's eyes met mine, trusting me, needing me. "Keep moving," I whispered. My voice was barely audible. Just a few more steps. The floor beneath us groaned with each careful step. Every shadow, every flicker of light made my skin crawl. The air was thick, heavy, smelling faintly of mildew and something metallic, something sharp. And then, a sound I'll never forget. A dragging, slow, deliberate movement came from the door at the end of the hallway. It was heavy, measured, and unmistakable. Not a chair, not furniture. Something else. Something alive. I froze. The woman froze. Every instinct told me to run, to get out of that house before it was too late. But I couldn't leave her. Not now. Not after everything I'd already seen. And that's when I realized the night of delivery number 42 was far from over. Whatever awaited us behind that door wasn't just a threat. It was something that had been waiting a long time, and it had no intention of letting anyone leave easily. We stopped at the top of the hall, just a few steps from the door. The dragging sounds had grown louder, deliberate, almost taunting. My flashlight shook in my hand, and I could feel the woman gripping my arm tightly. Her eyes were wide with terror, but there was a flicker of determination there too. A silent plea to face whatever waited. I took a slow, steadying breath. "We have to see what's behind that door," I whispered. "We can't keep hiding forever." The hallway seemed to stretch as I approached the door. Each step made the floorboards groan, echoing through the silent house. Shadows danced along the walls from the flickering flashlight beam, making it impossible to tell what was real and what was just my imagination. I reached the doorknob and hesitated. The metal was cold, almost icy, biting into my palm. The dragging stopped. Silence. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. Not with her beside me, not after everything we had seen. I pushed the door open slowly. It creaked just enough to let the shadows spill into the hallway. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single bare bulb swinging from the ceiling. Dust motes floated in the light, disturbed by the faint movements of the air. And then I saw it. A figure, hunched, moving methodically, dragging a large, heavy object across the floor. The metallic clink of chains accompanied the scraping sound. I froze, unable to tear my eyes away. It wasn't a person in the traditional sense. The way it moved was methodical, almost robotic, and yet disturbingly human in its deliberate control. The woman beside me gasped softly, her breath quickening. I could feel her trembling against my side. My mind raced. Who was this? What were they doing? And why did it feel like they had been expecting us? I took a cautious step forward. The figure stopped. Silence filled the room, broken only by our own breathing. My flashlight illuminated the object it was dragging. A chair, heavy and worn, with ropes tied around it. And on the chair, another figure, small, curled up, terrified. My stomach churned. The first figure turned slightly. I couldn't see their face clearly. The shadows swallowed it. But there was an unmistakable weight in the way they moved, a predatory patience that made every hair on my body stand on end. "Stay behind me," I whispered to the woman. My voice was barely audible, but firm. Every instinct screamed that the next few moments could determine whether we survived the night. I took another step, and the figure reacted instantly. A slow, deliberate shuffle toward us, the dragging sound returning with renewed intensity. My heart raced, my hands slick with sweat on the flashlight. The woman clutched my arm tighter, her nails digging into my sleeve. I tried to speak, to reason, but the words caught in my throat. The figure paused, as if assessing our resolve, testing whether we were intruders or prey. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, every shadow a threat. And then, without warning, the figure moved again. Faster this time, the ropes on the chair clattering against the floor. The sound reverberated through the hallway, filling the house with a rhythm that made my pulse pound in time. We were trapped. No easy escape. Every exit seemed farther away, more unreachable. And I realized, with a sickening clarity, that this night, delivery number 42 was far from over. Whatever had been waiting in that house had revealed only a fragment of its presence. And I had no idea how much worse it could get. The room seemed to shrink around us, shadows pressing in from every corner. The figure with the chair froze momentarily, then resumed its deliberate movements, dragging the heavy object with a precision that was almost surgical. My pulse raced, and the woman's grip on my arm was vice-like, grounding me, reminding me that we weren't alone in this nightmare. I forced myself to breathe, trying to focus on details, anything that could give me an advantage. The ropes on the chair were thick, frayed, and old, but secure. Whoever had tied them had done it methodically, with purpose. This wasn't random. This wasn't the work of someone desperate or reckless. This was calculated, controlled. The figure paused again, glancing toward the doorway, and for a moment, I could see a hint of movement, a flicker of recognition, as if it knew I was studying it. My flashlight trembled in my hand. I knew we had to act, to do something, but every instinct screamed caution. One wrong move and I didn't even want to imagine the consequences. The woman whispered, "We have to get her out." Her voice was barely audible, but it carried a fierce determination that surprised me. I nodded, understanding instantly. Whoever was behind this had been patient, waiting for someone like me, someone with no reason to be there. But now that we knew, there was no turning back. I inched closer, keeping the flashlight aimed just enough to illuminate the ropes without drawing too much attention. The figure paused again, tilting its head as if listening. I froze, heart hammering. The dragging sound from before had stopped, replaced by silence so thick it pressed against my ears. Then I saw it, a small door partially hidden behind a shelf. I hadn't noticed it before, but the way the shadows clung to it suggested it was rarely used, almost forgotten. I realized instinctively that this could be another exit, a way to get the woman out safely. "Over there," I whispered, pointing subtly. She nodded and moved carefully, every step measured, silent. My hands shook as I guided her toward the hidden door. Every creak of the floorboard beneath us made my stomach twist in fear. The figure noticed. It shifted suddenly, the chair scraping against the floor. The sound made us both freeze, our breaths caught in our throats. Its head tilted, slowly, deliberately, and then it moved again, gliding toward us with a purpose that made my blood run cold. I glanced at the bound woman. Her eyes were wide, filled with silent pleas. I had to act fast. I grabbed a nearby shelf, using it to block the figure's path, giving the woman a few precious seconds to reach the hidden door. She slipped through just as the figure lunged, its movement swift and precise. I slammed the shelf down, holding my ground, the dragging sound growing louder, more aggressive. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears. The figure paused, assessing me, calculating its next move. I realized in that moment that this wasn't just about the woman. It was about control, about power, about fear itself. The hallway felt endless. Every shadow seemed alive, every whisper in the darkness a threat. I knew I had to follow, had to see where this path led, but the weight of what I had seen pressed down on me. The hidden door opened onto a narrow passageway, dark and suffocating. The woman had already begun moving through it, and I followed, flashlight shaking, illuminating only the immediate space ahead. The sound of dragging echoed behind us, a constant reminder that we were being hunted. I realized then that the house held secrets far beyond what I had imagined. Every corner, every creaking floorboard, every shadow was part of a meticulously crafted nightmare, and we were now trapped within it, forced to navigate its horrors with only our wits and courage. And as we moved deeper into the passage, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The hidden passageway was narrow, barely wide enough for the two of us to move side by side. The walls were damp, the smell of mold thick and oppressive. My flashlight flickered again, casting long, wavering shadows that made every surface look alive, crawling. Every step felt amplified, echoing off the walls and into the darkness beyond. The woman stayed close, her shoulder brushing against mine, her breathing shallow but steady. She hadn't said a word since we'd entered the passage, but I could feel her tension as palpably as my own. Whoever had kept her here had trained her to be silent, to move carefully, and the instincts ingrained in her were now saving both our lives. I tried to focus on the details, the texture of the walls, the uneven floorboards, the faint traces of dust that suggested occasional movement. This passage hadn't been used often, perhaps decades at most, but it had been maintained just enough to serve a purpose. And I had a sinking feeling I would soon understand what that purpose was. The faint dragging noise we'd heard upstairs was gone, replaced by a new sound. The soft scuff of something being slid along the floor, faint but deliberate. It seemed to follow us, an echo of the presence above, a reminder that the house wasn't finished with us yet. The passageway took a sharp turn to the left, and I could feel a change in the air, cooler, damper, heavier. I pressed on, urging the woman forward with gentle nudges. Every instinct screamed that we were being watched, measured, evaluated. The air was thick with anticipation, a weight that settled over my shoulders and made each step more labored than the last. Halfway down the corridor, I noticed markings on the wall, faint scratches, symbols etched into the plaster. They weren't letters or numbers, at least not in any language I recognized. They seemed almost ritualistic, like someone had been leaving messages or warnings for decades. I reached out, brushing my fingertips across the grooves. The plaster was dry and crumbly, but the pattern was deliberate, unervingly precise. The woman's whisper broke the silence. "I think there's a door up ahead." I nodded, grateful for her voice. Her knowledge of the house was astounding, considering I'd only known her for a few minutes. But it made sense. She had been trapped here, confined to its horrors for far longer than I had imagined. The door at the end of the passage was small, wooden, and unremarkable, except for the scratches that lined the frame, deep and jagged, like they had been made in a hurry. I hesitated for a moment, flashlight aimed, pulse racing. The dragging sound from above seemed to grow, almost in anticipation, as if the house itself were urging us forward. "Ready," I whispered to her. She nodded, and I slowly pushed the door open. The hinges creaked softly, the sound amplified in the confined space of the passageway. The room beyond was dark, the light from my flashlight revealing a small, cluttered space. Old furniture, dust-covered boxes, and a faint, musty odor filled the air. But what caught my attention, what made my stomach turn, was the floor. Scattered across the wooden boards were footprints, small, bare, and darkened, leading to a large hatch in the center of the room. The hatch was heavy, with iron handles and faint scratches along the edges. The woman whispered again, her voice trembling slightly. That's where they keep it." I froze. My mind raced. Keep what? I took a step closer to the hatch, feeling the cool air rise from beneath it. The dragging sounds, the whispers, the careful patience of the house. It all made sense now. Whatever horrors lay below, they had been carefully concealed, deliberately hidden, and we had stumbled right into the heart of it. I glanced at her and our eyes met. Neither of us spoke. Words were useless now. Everything depended on what we found beneath that hatch. And as I reached for the iron handle, the soft scuffing sound returned, louder this time, coming from somewhere deeper in the house. Something was moving. Something was aware. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to uncover, because once that hatch opened, there would be no going back. I braced myself before placing my hands on the iron handles of the hatch. They were cold, rough against my palms, each groove seeming to whisper warnings I didn't want to hear. The woman stood beside me, silent, her eyes wide with fear and anticipation. She had been here before, had seen whatever lay beneath, and yet she had led me this far. That alone told me the danger we were about to uncover was beyond anything I could have imagined. I lifted the hatch slowly. It resisted at first, then groaned with a sound that seemed to echo through the house like a moan of warning. Dust and musty air spilled out, carrying with it the scent of something old, decayed, and metallic. My stomach tightened. Below, a steep wooden ladder descended into darkness. The air rising from the opening was cold and damp, like a cellar untouched for decades. The dragging sound from above had stopped, replaced by a heavier, deeper silence, as if the house itself were holding its breath. I glanced at the woman. Her lips were pressed together, her eyes fixed on the darkness below. She nodded, as if to say, "We have to go down." I descended first, my flashlight cutting a narrow path into the blackness. The ladder groaned under my weight, and every movement felt magnified in the oppressive stillness. The woman followed, careful to keep her steps steady. Each rung we touched seemed to echo back up the ladder, carrying our presence into the unseen corners of the house. At the bottom, the flashlight revealed a room far larger than I had expected. The walls were lined with shelves, cupboards, and storage crates, all coated in years of dust. But the floor, and what lay upon it, immediately drew my attention and made me freeze in place. It was a collection of cages, small, cramped, and cruelly designed. Inside each one, figures, some awake, some unconscious, huddled together in the dim light. Their eyes, when they opened, were filled with a mixture of fear, desperation, and resignation. Couldn't breathe. The sheer scale of it, the realization of what had been kept hidden here, made my head spin. The woman beside me whispered, barely audible, They've been keeping them here for years." I swallowed hard. The dragging, the whispers, the careful, methodical control of the house above. It all made sense now. This wasn't just a random act of cruelty. This was organized, premeditated. Whoever had built this had done so with intent, with patience, with a terrifying understanding of fear. I scanned the room, noting the cages closest to the ladder. One contained a young girl, no older than 10, her eyes wide and unblinking. Another held a man, gaunt and pale, shaking slightly. Chains and ropes were strewn about, remnants of previous restraints. It was a gallery of suffering, curated and hidden away from the world above. The woman pressed closer to me. "We need to get them out," she whispered, her voice firm despite the tremor beneath it. Before, her words faltered, swallowed by the oppressive air. I nodded. Every instinct screamed to help, to rescue, but the enormity of the situation was staggering. I didn't even know where to start, and then I heard it, movement from above. The dragging sound had returned, deliberate and rhythmic, echoing down the ladder and through the floorboards of the hidden chamber. Something was coming, and whatever it was, it had been waiting for someone like me. Someone who would pry too deeply, who would try to interfere. I glanced at the woman again, and we shared a silent understanding. There was no choice now. The cages, the suffering, the hidden horrors. It all had to end tonight. But even as we prepared to act, the house seemed to shift around us, alive in a way that was impossible, watching, anticipating, and ready to punish any misstep. I took a deep breath, gripping the edge of the nearest cage. This was it. The moment that would define the night of delivery number 42. The moment we would either escape with our lives or be trapped here forever. And then, a sound from the far corner of the room made my blood run cold. A slow, deliberate, dragging step, moving closer, resonating through the floor, announcing the arrival of the unseen presence that had haunted the house since the beginning. The room felt suffocating, as if the walls themselves were pressing inward, pushing us toward the cages like prey toward a trap. The dragging sound from above grew louder, slower, deliberate, a rhythm that matched my racing heart. Every shadow seemed to twitch, to anticipate our next move. I turned to the woman beside me. Her eyes were sharp, alert, filled with a determination that steadied me. "We need a plan," I whispered, keeping my voice low. "We can't just rush them out, or we'll alert whoever's up there." She nodded. "We'll start with the closest cages," she whispered. "Get them free quietly, then guide them through the passage." Her calm, precise tone contrasted sharply with the fear clawing at my chest. She had been here before. She knew the layout, the dangers, the risks, and I realized I had to trust her instincts completely. I crouched beside the first cage, a young man inside, thin and trembling. The locks were old, rusted, and I struggled at first, the metal biting into my palms. The woman helped, guiding my hands to loosen the mechanism without making a sound. Finally, with a soft click, the door swung open. The man froze, then gave a barely perceptible nod, understanding the urgency. Step by step, we worked our way through the cages. Each opening revealed more suffering. The gaunt faces, the hollow eyes, the sheer exhaustion etched into every expression. Some whispered, some stared silently, all understanding that this was their only chance. All the while, the dragging sound continued, closer now, echoing off the walls, through the floorboards, reminding us that time was running out. My pulse thumped in my ears as I moved from cage to cage, unlocking, guiding, whispering reassurances I barely believed myself. We reached the young girl, the one no older than 10. She flinched at every movement, her small body trembling uncontrollably. I knelt beside her, trying to speak softly, calmly. "It's okay. We're here to get you out. You're safe now." Her eyes darted around the dark room, wide and frightened, then back at me. After a tense moment, she nodded slowly, letting me take her hand. I felt the weight of her trust, the responsibility pressing down like a physical force. The last cages were near the far wall, closest to the sound of dragging. Whoever or whatever was moving above was aware of our actions now. The rhythm of footsteps seemed almost synchronized with our movements, like a predator circling its prey. We reached the final cage. It contained an older man, gaunt, with eyes that had seen too much. He hesitated, fear etched into every line of his face. The woman beside me whispered encouragement, guiding him, calming him. I unlocked the door and motioned for him to follow us. He moved slowly, deliberately, aware that any misstep could be catastrophic. And then it happened. A loud crash from above, the dragging, the scraping, the sound of something heavy being thrown down the hallway. The floorboards shuddered under the force. My heart leapt into my throat. "We have to move. Now!" The woman hissed. I nodded, grabbing the girl's hand, guiding the freed captives toward the hidden passage. The narrow corridor was more oppressive than before, the shadows stretching and flickering as we moved. The dragging sound grew louder behind us, closer, almost deliberate. I glanced back. The dark doorway at the end of the hall had widened, shadows spilling into the passage. Whatever had been waiting above was coming for us. Every step we took now felt precarious, like walking on a knife's edge. We reached the narrow stairs leading back to the boarded-up hall, the woman guiding the group ahead while I stayed with the rear, watching, listening. The sound from above was relentless, echoing, bouncing, pressing in on us from all sides. And then I realized the truth. We couldn't just escape the room. Whoever had orchestrated this had prepared for intruders. They had anticipated someone like me, someone who would try to intervene. The house wasn't just hiding horrors. It was a trap, and we were caught squarely in its center. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my racing thoughts. The group ahead moved cautiously, carefully, unaware of the full extent of the threat closing in behind us. Every instinct screamed to push forward, to get them to safety. But the shadows, the dragging, the unseen presence, it all whispered a single terrifying truth. This night was far from over. We moved quickly but cautiously down the narrow hallway. The freed captives huddled close together, guided by the woman. My flashlight cut a swath of light through the darkness, illuminating dust, shadows, and the occasional scuff mark from years of hidden movement. Each step felt like it echoed across the entire house, though I knew the sound was nothing compared to what was coming. The dragging noise from above had grown into a relentless rhythm, accompanied by a low, grating scrape that made my skin crawl. Whoever or whatever was following us was no longer hiding. It had sensed our intrusion, and the intensity of its pursuit was unmistakable. "Keep moving," the woman whispered urgently. She led the group with remarkable poise, her knowledge of the house's layout guiding us like a map only she could read. I stayed behind, scanning for any obstacles, listening for the subtle shifts in the sounds above us. As we reached the first junction in the hallway, a sudden crash resounded from above. Something heavy had been thrown, maybe a piece of furniture, maybe a trap. The floorboards quivered, dust falling like rain around us. My heart leapt, adrenaline surging. One of the younger captives froze, terrified, but the woman nudged him forward gently yet firmly. "Keep going. You're safe now," she whispered. The words sounded hollow even to my ears, but I knew we had no time to pause. The hallway stretched endlessly. Shadows twisted unnaturally as my flashlight beam flickered, the low hum of tension pressing down on us. I could hear faint whispers of movement to my right, the scrape of feet, the subtle creak of floorboards, the dragging, relentless, closing in. Then the sound shifted, not just from above, but alongside us, faster now, as if the presence was splitting, approaching from multiple directions. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to focus. The group ahead moved steadily, unaware of how close danger truly was. We turned a corner, and the passage opened into a larger foyer. Moonlight spilled through cracked windows, offering a faint, silvery illumination. It was the first time in what felt like hours that we could see more than a few feet ahead. Relief surged briefly, only to be replaced by renewed terror when the scraping sound intensified. Something moved across the upper balcony that overlooked the foyer, a shadow shifting unnaturally fast. My flashlight flickered again. I felt the woman brush my arm, urging me forward. "We can make it," she whispered, voice tight with tension. I pushed the adrenaline aside and focused on the task, guiding the captives to the nearest exit, keeping them calm, keeping them moving. Every second counted. Every shadow, every whisper, every scrape reminded me that the house had been designed to ensnare anyone who dared disturb its secrets. We reached the front door. It was locked, padlocked from the outside, rusted but sturdy. My heart sank. The woman cursed softly under her breath. "There's another way," she said, leading us to a side door, barely noticeable behind a tangle of overgrown vines visible through the moonlight. As we approached it, the scraping and dragging from above reached a deafening crescendo. I could feel the presence, just beyond sight, preparing to strike. My pulse throbbed in my ears. The woman turned to the group and hissed, "Out now!" One by one, we slipped through the narrow door into the cold night. The air was crisp, sharp, and tasted like freedom, but the sense of pursuit didn't end. I could still hear the dragging, slower now, deliberate, coming from inside the house. I glanced back. The windows of the house reflected moonlight, shadows dancing in patterns that were impossible, unnatural. Whoever had orchestrated this, whoever had kept these people imprisoned, was still inside, watching, waiting. We ran, stumbling over roots and debris, hearts hammering, lungs burning. Every step carried the risk of being caught, of turning a desperate escape into a nightmare. And as the house loomed behind us, silent again in the moonlight, I realized one terrifying truth. Delivery number 42 wasn't just a night of horrors. It was the beginning of a story that would haunt every one of us forever. The cold night air hit us like a shock as we burst through the side door. Relief surged briefly, only to be replaced by the stark realization that our escape was far from over. The property surrounding the house was overgrown, uneven, and treacherous. Roots and hidden debris snag at our feet, threatening to trip us with every step. The woman led the way, guiding the group through the darkness. Her knowledge of the surrounding land was apparent. Each turn, each hidden dip, she navigated instinctively. I stayed behind her, supporting the slower ones, whispering reassurances I barely believed myself. Every sound, the snapping of a branch, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of an owl, seemed amplified, a reminder that we were not alone in the night. "Keep moving," she hissed. "Don't stop. Don't look back." I glanced behind us, and my stomach clenched. The house loomed in the distance, its dark windows like eyes watching our every move. I couldn't see anyone. No shadow, no figure. But I knew the presence inside hadn't let us go entirely. It was patient, waiting, lingering. We moved swiftly through the brush, slipping past fallen branches and thorny undergrowth. The freed captives stumbled occasionally, but the woman's calm guidance kept everyone moving. Their fear was palpable, an invisible weight pressing down on us all. Somewhere behind us, a faint scrape echoed through the trees, a sound that could have been the wind, or it could have been the house reaching for us one last time. My heart pounded. I didn't dare look. I focused instead on keeping the group together, on getting them to safety. After several tense minutes, we reached a gravel road, illuminated faintly by the pale glow of the moon. I could see houses in the distance, civilization, light, the promise of safety. The group's pace quickened, renewed by the sight of the familiar, but the sense of dread didn't lift. I knew the house and its secrets would linger in our minds forever. The dragging, the shadows, the cages, they weren't just memories. They were a warning. We reached a distant street lamp, the light washing over us, revealing the dirt-streaked faces of the captives. Their expressions were a mixture of disbelief, fear, and cautious hope. For the first time in hours, I allowed myself a deep breath, letting the night air fill my lungs. The woman whispered, "We're not safe yet. We need to get to the police. They'll know what to do." I nodded, understanding that the true danger wasn't the immediate escape. It was what would follow. Unraveling the truth, confronting the authorities, facing the reality of the horrors hidden in that house. And as we moved toward the distant lights of civilization, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching us, patient, waiting. The house hadn't finished with us. But for now, we ran. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat was a small victory, a defiance of the night's horrors. And I knew that even if we survived physically, the memory of delivery number 42 would haunt us forever. The distant glow of the town's lights never felt so welcoming. Each step toward them was like moving through a fog that had been pressing against my chest for hours. The road under our feet was solid, familiar, a stark contrast to the twisted corridors and shadowed rooms we had escaped. Yet, the weight of the night's horrors pressed on us, reminding me that safety was only an illusion until someone knew what had happened inside that house. The woman guided the group toward the nearest police station, her movements purposeful. I stayed behind the slower ones, my flashlight now swinging loosely at my side, unused except for brief glimmers into the darkness around us. The freed captives were quiet, their eyes wide, scanning the shadows around them as if the unseen presence might still be following. When we reached the police station, the first challenge presented itself: disbelief. The night shift officers were tired, overworked, and skeptical. A disheveled delivery driver, a traumatized woman, and a group of rescued individuals appearing out of the night. It sounded implausible. My voice trembled as I tried to recount everything, my words spilling too fast, too frantic, struggling to convey the gravity of what we had uncovered. The woman spoke calmly, precisely, describing the house, the hidden passage, the cages, every detail we could remember. Some of the officers exchanged uneasy glances, one muttering, "Are we talking about some abandoned building, or?" The fear in the woman's eyes silenced him immediately. She didn't need to argue. The weight of truth in her voice, the palpable terror in her presence, demanded acknowledgement. Finally, one of the older officers stepped forward, taking our statements seriously. "We'll get a team together. We'll investigate," he said, voice low but determined. He had seen enough in his career to know when a story was too precise to be fabricated. We were escorted back to the station to wait. The freed captives sat quietly in the dimly lit room, some clutching each other, others staring into the distance, reliving moments too painful to voice. The woman and I remained standing, exchanging silent glances. Neither of us spoke, words felt inadequate. And yet, as time passed, a creeping realization settled over me. Escaping the house was only the beginning. Its secrets were buried deep, and even in the presence of the authorities, the implications were staggering. Who had done this? How many had been trapped over the years? And what did the house itself represent? A place or a mechanism for something far more sinister? Then, the first sounds of commotion reached us from outside. Officers preparing to approach the house had radioed in. The building appeared empty, quiet, undisturbed. Nothing seemed amiss from the outside. Yet we knew the truth. Every shadow, every creak, every lingering presence inside that house told a different story. I felt a chill that wasn't from the night air. It was the realization that, despite our escape, the house and its horrors weren't finished with us. Whoever had orchestrated the cages, the dragging, the darkness, They had planned for every contingency. And even now, far from its walls, we weren't truly safe. The woman whispered again, barely audible. "They think it's over, but it's not." I nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. The authorities could investigate, document, and perhaps even bring some of the perpetrators to justice. But the experience, the fear, the raw confrontation with evil in its most calculated form, would linger in our minds forever. As the first police units approached the house, flashlights cutting through the darkness, I realized one inescapable fact. Delivery number 42 had changed everything. The night's horrors weren't confined to the walls of that boarded-up house. They had followed us, imprinted on our memories, etched into our very sense of reality. And though the survivors would find temporary relief in the presence of the authorities, none of us could shake the knowledge that true evil often hides in plain sight, patient, deliberate, and waiting for the next unsuspecting victim. The police approached the boarded-up house with caution, flashlights cutting arcs through the darkness, their radios crackling faintly with updates from the perimeter. I followed at a distance, keeping the survivors close behind, feeling the tension in the air coil tighter with every step. Even outside, the building loomed like a silent predator, its dark windows staring back at us with a weight that felt almost tangible. When the officers finally pried open the main entrance, the smell hit me immediately. Stale, moldy, metallic, and unmistakably human. The air seemed heavier here than it had felt during our escape, as if the house had been holding its breath, waiting for the intrusion. I clenched my fists, gripping the flashlight tightly, bracing myself for what the team would find. The first officers descended into the passageway and cellar. Their shouts and the clatter of equipment echoed off the walls, revealing the hidden horror in stark relief. The cages were still there, empty now, but every scratch on the walls, every scuff on the floorboards, every rusted lock told a story of years of suffering. The sheer scale of it made my stomach churn, my pulse quicken. I watched as investigators meticulously documented everything. They took photographs, collected samples, and whispered to each other in hushed, urgent tones. The woman and I hovered near the edge of the passageway, silent witnesses to a nightmare that had become reality. One officer called out, voice tight with disbelief, "There's more, under the floorboards." A team member lifted a section, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside were journals, handwritten notes, and photographs, evidence of the captives, their torment, and the meticulous planning that had gone into keeping them hidden. My stomach sank further as I read snippets. Lists of names, dates, instructions, and warnings. Every page screamed intention. Every note confirmed premeditation. The dragging sound we had heard for hours, likely remnants of mechanisms designed to terrify, to maintain control. The house itself a carefully orchestrated instrument of fear. I swallowed hard, realizing that what we had experienced firsthand was just a fraction of the calculated cruelty designed by the unknown perpetrator. The investigators moved slowly, as though they too felt the oppressive weight of the house. Every corner, every shadow, every hidden space revealed more. Cages, remnants of restraints, faded markings that hinted at previous horrors. Some of the officers looked pale, their faces betraying a mixture of disgust and disbelief. I caught the woman's eye. She shook her head slightly, whispering, "They don't understand. They have no idea how deep it goes." Her voice trembled, though she tried to keep her composure. I nodded, understanding perfectly. The evidence was being uncovered, yes, but the true terror, the psychological, the lingering, the intimate fear, was something no report could fully capture. As the night wore on, the team worked tirelessly. Every discovery added layers to the story. More cages, hidden rooms, evidence of repeated abductions. The house seemed to sigh with every revelation, the walls echoing the whispers of the past. And then, just as we thought the worst had been documented, an officer called out from the far corner of the cellar, "You need to see this." We hurried over, and my blood ran cold. Hidden behind a false wall was a room so meticulously concealed that it was invisible even to those who had explored the house for years. Inside were personal belongings, letters, photographs, items that tied the captives to the outside world. It was a reminder that these weren't just random victims. They were people stolen from lives, families, and futures, each meticulously cataloged in a horrifying archive of control. The room seemed alive in its silence, the accumulated weight of years pressing down on anyone who entered. I shivered, a deep, visceral chill that went beyond the night air. The house had revealed its darkest secrets, and yet it felt as though it had one final message. Evil often hides quietly, patiently, and only reveals itself to those who stumble too close. As the investigators continued their work, I couldn't shake the feeling that even now, outside in the open night, the house's presence lingered. Its shadow stretched beyond the walls, following us, haunting the edges of our vision. The dragging, the whispers, the meticulous cruelty. It had been unleashed, and it would never be forgotten. The sun was beginning to rise as we left the police station, the pale light washing over the town in a way that felt surreal after the long, harrowing night. The survivors moved quietly, their eyes hollow, faces etched with the lingering fear of what they had endured. I walked alongside them, my own body trembling, as if every step on solid ground reminded me of how fragile safety could be. Even in daylight, the shadows of the boarded-up house seemed to stretch far beyond its walls. The street looked ordinary, calm, and harmless, but I knew better. Behind that innocuous exterior had been a carefully orchestrated nightmare, one that had trapped innocent people for years, one that had thrived in the quiet, in the forgotten corners of the world. The authorities had already begun cataloging the evidence, preparing to dig deeper into the history of the house, the captives, and the person responsible. The house would be investigated, its dark secrets exposed to the light of law and scrutiny. And yet, knowing that offered little comfort. The horror we had witnessed wasn't something that could be erased with paperwork or arrests. It lingered in the air, in our minds, in every glance over our shoulders. The woman who had guided us out spoke softly to the group. "We're safe now for the moment," she said. "But you need to remember, this world can be darker than you imagine. Not everything hides in plain sight. Some things wait, patient and deliberate, until someone steps too close." I nodded silently, understanding the weight of her words. They were not threats, but truths, ones that I would carry forever. We eventually returned to the town center, where friends, family, and authorities gathered. The survivors were reunited with loved ones, but the joy was muted. Trauma has a way of shadowing even the happiest moments, and I could see it in their eyes, the deep, unshakable knowledge of what had happened in that house. And for me, the memory of the night would not fade. The dragging, the shadows, the cages, the hushed voices of those trapped in unimaginable fear, they were imprinted on my mind. Even now, as I recount this story, I can feel the cold touch of the iron handles, the weight of the locks, the oppressive darkness pressing down from the ceilings and walls. Delivery number 42. It began as a simple night, a routine job, a final order before going home. But it became something far more sinister, a glimpse into human cruelty hidden in plain sight, a reminder that danger and evil often exist in the quiet, in the unseen, waiting for someone to stumble into its grasp. I've returned to my life, but I am changed. Every shadow, every abandoned building, every locked door carries a twinge of caution. I can never fully forget the faces of those still haunted by the horrors within that house. I can never forget the dragging, the whispering presence, the calculated terror that lingered, patient and deliberate. Even now, as I speak these words, I know that some part of that house remains with me. Its echo will follow me, a reminder of what can happen when darkness hides in plain sight, waiting for the unsuspecting. And though the world moves on, the story of delivery number 42 remains. A tale of survival, of terror, of the invisible forces of cruelty that we are fortunate enough to escape, but not fortunate enough to forget.